Howdy, folks. Welcome to Redneck Gone Green. I'm your host, David Cobb. I am the Redneck, and you bet I've gone green, and I'm trying to convince you to do it too. And when we say go green here, we mean that in two very important ways. The first and most important way is deep ecology, an appreciation and a recognition and an acknowledgement of the deep interconnected nature of all of life itself. And whether you come at that from a hard science perspective or from a eco-spiritual, eco-feminist perspective, or like me, you say those are both completely valid ways to understand reality, we have to acknowledge that human beings are connected to all of life in an interconnected web. Whatever we do to that web, we ultimately do to ourselves. The second way we mean go green is Green Party. I am a proud and unapologetic member of the Green Party. We don't typically spend a lot of time doing Green Party rah-rah or rallying on this show. We typically try to really identify people who are doing good, important work from our perspective of the need for radical democracy. But today's show, we are going to actually have to confront the Democratic Party, the Working Families Party, fusion voting, a whole bunch of stuff. And we're going to dive right into it. For those of you who had a chance to read the Substack, you know where we're headed. But before we do, we're going to make sure to celebrate that Julian Assange has been released from prison and is, even as we speak now today on Tuesday, June 25th, 6 p.m. Eastern, on his way to Australia to be reunited with his family. So we're going to bring Jack Rabbit, our executive producer and all around man about town and good looking political pundit. There he is. Jack Rabbit, how you doing?
Doing pretty good, David. Thank you.
All right. Well, listen, I got to say, Julian Assange is free. I want to absolutely celebrate that. But I
Awesome.
also think it came at a pretty darn high price.
Yeah, that's really true, David. I mean, I think that we do have to absolutely celebrate that Julian is out of he's basically escaped the prison that he was in for how long has it been? It's been like a really long time. Do you
Oh
do you
yeah,
know how
well,
many
look, it was
years?
7 years in basically house arrest in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, and then 5 years at Balmarsh. I mean, it's
Ugh.
been over a decade.
Yeah, and I mean the sad thing about what's going on is that as much as I am really happy for him as the individual, I think that one of the big issues here is that he had to, part of his plea deal was that he had to plead guilty to the charge that the U.S. has kind of attacked him with regarding what is it? It's the Espionage Act, correct?
It is the Espionage Act, and let's again. I really appreciate where you went there, Jack. So the deal is quote good for Assange because he gets out of the prison where he's been suffering from really serious medical problems for the past 5 years, and he was again in the Ecuadorian embassy in London for 7 years prior to that. So getting out, the end result is undeniably good, but the reality is that what the Biden administration required in the deal was a guilty plea, and a guilty plea using the Espionage Act. So the Biden administration forced Assange to plea in order to get his freedom. And the plea is a conspiracy to violate the Espionage Act, which amounts to, and I'm going to quote the law, quote, receiving and obtaining secret documents and willfully communicating them to persons not entitled to receive them, end quote. So in Assange's case, that means the public, right? So it is a crime that journalism is supposed to do. Journalists and mainstream outlets all over the US commit that quote crime every day. So
Right.
this is really troubling to say the least. What we're actually seeing is a precedent being set so that anytime a journalist receives informations that have not been released and sanctioned is subject to potential criminal indictment under the Espionage Act.
Now, one of the things that I find particularly troubling as well, David, is that this is something that is coming from a government, the United States, that really loves to celebrate itself as being a champion of democratic values such as freedom of the press. Um,
It's it's so true, Jack. I mean, I again, the Biden administration specifically is trying to have it both ways. Remember, they could have and should have dropped this case 3 years ago when they took control of the Department of Justice, which, by the way, every single major civil liberties and human rights group in the country repeatedly implored both Biden and then Trump and Obama before that to drop these charges. They could have dropped the case at any time with Assange spending the same amount of time in prison. But remember, they felt the need to emphasize in court documents that they believe that obtaining and publishing, quote, secret government documents is a crime. And again, these are, I mean, it is reprehensible and beyond the pale for a government, as you say, that lauds itself for freedom of press to be attacking journalism in generally, or the concept of journalism generally, and Julian Assange specifically, because remember, at a time where all he did was publish information. The same thing happened with Edward Snowden. We can go down the list. This is actually incredibly chilling. And again, I'll just say it again, incredibly dangerous.
well, it also really tells on the corporate media, right? I mean, that's kind of what we see, is that the corporate media made no mention of Julian Assange. There was just recently what was it, the press club dinner or something like that, where they invite the president in to, have a conversation with him, and all the royalty of like the corporate press show up, and there wasn't a single mention of Assange during the entire time, but they were really happy to talk about how important press freedoms were, and about how Russia's bad on press freedom, and all the bad guys around the world that we're supposed to hate, and the media is supposed to complain about. And no mention of Julian Assange whatsoever. So I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're making an incredibly important point, and that is that the U.S. government, under both Democrats and Republicans, will espouse platitudes. It will be talking points. But when it comes to specifics, like the Assange case, what we'll see is the empire actually empire going to empire, right? I do want to quote Jody Ginsburg, the CEO of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Immediately when the deal came through, I thought she really nailed it. She said, Julian Assange faced a prosecution that had grave implications for journalists and press freedom worldwide. She goes on to say, while we welcome the end of his detention, the U.S. pursuit of Assange in the first place has set a dangerous and harmful legal precedent by opening the way for journalists to be tried under the Espionage Act if they receive classified material from whistleblowers. This should never have been the case, end quote. And I think that Jody is really onto something here, because this whole idea of what did Julian Assange do again was literally just publish documents that were government documents themselves. I mean, it's almost astounding to me. And I want to lift up Dave Petrovich, a frequent guest I see. He says, going back to the Pentagon Papers and the U.S. versus New York Times and Washington Post. I mean, that's exactly right, Dave. Like, there is a long history. And Jacqueline, who I know joins us from somewhere in the UK, says the UK government needs to be held accountable for the way he was treated in Belmarsh prison. Probably won't, though. She goes on to say, someone suggested in a chat in another live stream that this could be used to shut down WikiLeaks. Jackie, I think that's really what's really got me very, very worried. WikiLeaks is now weaker than it was before. Again, let's celebrate Julian Assange being released, but let's also acknowledge and underscore at what cost. And the cost, my friends, is the freedom of the press. So after spending 7 years in the Ecuadorian embassy, then again, so he's pleaded to one felony to avoid more time. So nothing can undo that past 12 or 13 years. But as again, I'm going to go back to now another reporter Rebecca Vincent of Reporters Without Borders says, nothing can undo those past 13 years, but she says, it's never too late to do the right thing. We will continue to campaign in support of journalists around the world who find themselves targeted for national security reporting and for reform of the U.S. Espionage Act so that it can never again be used to target journalistic activity. Again, we really have to underscore that this was not an example, whether you thought it was a good idea or not, of somebody profiting from government secrets. This was simply exposing secrets. And again, what were most of those secrets that got both the Obama administration and the Trump administration and the Biden administration so worked up? U.S. foreign policy, empire. And we have to be very clear that there are absolutely 100% differences between Democratic and Republican Party policies and the domestic level. Whether they're enough to warrant a distinction, that's something we always
Well,
talk about.
and David, this is we have a slight disagreement there, and this is what I wanted to bring up. Thanks for pointing that out. Is that, there's a real problem with the hypocrisy here that we're seeing from this Democratic president and this Democratic administration, and I think it's this Democrat, and it's really important to point out, because the problem here that we have is on the one hand, we have a rhetoric of press freedom and democracy, right? Open, First Amendment, open freedom of ideas, and all that, right? Very vehemently opposed to, like, the crackdowns on the press around the world, and the problem here is that we see the actual the actual policies of the administration being such as shutting down that press freedom. Now, and the thing is that I really want people to understand here is that it's not just what they've done to Julian Assange and shutting down press freedom in his case, using the Espionage Act to be able to prosecute him for something which is really literally just doing journalism. But there's also a systemic approach toward shutting down free speech, right? We see, I'm not sure if people are familiar with, but I mean, there was a lawsuit that was brought against the Biden administration because of the intimidation towards social media platforms that they actually lost. It was taken to court, and unfortunately, I don't have like the specific details, and I apologize for that because I wasn't prepared for this. But it's important to point out that, that the Biden administration was actually held liable and guilty for intimidating social media to shut down conversations, to censor, public conversation regarding a number of different topics. And so my point being is that on the one hand, you have this kind of American rhetoric, this pro freedom rhetoric, but the actual policies are such that it's really problematic. It's really dangerous. And I think it's dangerous not because it's hypocritical, this idea of being hypocritical, but it's dangerous because you have, on the one hand, a presentation that sounds very accessible and exciting, and something that you want to be a part of, something like we're talking about freedom, and we're talking about freedom of the press and free speech and all this stuff. But on the other hand, you see the actual policies that are shutting that stuff down. They're anti-democratic, coming from the Democrat Party. And so I do, my concern here is that we are making kind of drawing a distinction where, if the end point, right, is censorship and authoritarianism, does it matter what what color the party is?
Well, I appreciate that, Jack, and I'm going to actually take us back and remind first viewers and or listeners, if you're watching us live on either Rumble or YouTube or Facebook, welcome. Glad to have you. Perhaps you're watching this video after the fact. Maybe you're listening to the recording that Jack will make and make available as a podcast. But one thing that we know for sure here on Redneck Gone Green is that we have unsanctioned conversations. We have the kind of conversations that we're not supposed to be having, and that is real talk about both the Democratic and Republican parties, and where in my estimation, they conflate. And WikiLeaks to me really underscores this. I want to remind ourselves and viewers, listeners, that WikiLeaks came into prominence in 2010. They released 250,000 State Department cables, which revealed what the U.S. government really thought about both national leaders, dictators, and supposed allies. It brought to the surface a dark and horrific truth of crimes being committed by the U.S. government in our name. It included explicit human rights violations, covert operations, cover ups. The entire WikiLeaks expose demonstrated that the United States government, under both Democratic and Republican administrations, is engaged in unadulterated imperialism, one founded on tactics that includes torture, military action, trade deals, so-called soft power. It is in a perpetual pursuit of not only, quote, influence, but literally controlling what other governments do. So to me, WikiLeaks and what it represents exposes again empire. And that's where there is under no circumstances can I challenge anybody to come onto this program in terms of U.S. foreign policy and show me a distinction between Democrats and Republicans, because at the end of the day, it's always about conquest. It's always about domination. It's about extracting resources from other countries. That's literally what U.S. foreign policy is about.
Amen, brother.
So Jacqueline also writes in again. I love our live guest. It seems that most mainstream media is just a stenographer for whatever party their billionaire owner is in favor of. I got to tell you, Jackie, I think that actually really captures it. You know, it's always funny to me when I hear the conservatives bemoan like the quote liberal media or progressive media as if they are controlling the narrative. And I like to say, the media in this country is just as liberal as the billionaires who actually control and own it. And I want to be clear about something. I don't believe that there is a liberal or progressive controlled media. And nor do I think that there is a conservative controlled media. I think there is a corporate controlled media. I think the narrative that is constantly told is rah, rah, USA. It is also consume, obey, purchase. Consume, obey, purchase. That's the narrative. And, this is one of the things, Jack, you and I often off of the program sort of go back and forth on where is the balance where we can find common ground with ordinary folk to build a mass movement that actually rejects both the corporate wing of the Democratic Party and the corporate wing of the Republican Party. Where can we find that common ground?
Yeah, I mean, well, one of the things that I think is really important to point out is that, like, Jackie used the term mainstream media, MSM. And I think it's really so important to point out that independent media is really overtaking legacy corporate media. I mean, big time. Like, there's no comparison as far as like resources go. But if you look at it, like, Joe Rogan, for example, is getting like millions of views on his podcasts. And, in the meantime, your CNNs and MSNBCs have absolutely anemic numbers as far as like, the viewing, the people who are watching them. It's just, it's just night and day.
It is. And I really appreciate, and of course, when Jack uses the word legacy media, what I translate what that means is the old media where they acted as gatekeepers for any narrative or story, right? And so again, like frankly, this program itself, we are content creators. We're trying to have conversation with people and trying to figure out how the world works, but we're not supposed to be having that. So there is something to be said for a technology that is democratizing the ability to have conversations, which to me is why it's so incredibly dangerous when we see, again, both the Democrats and the Republicans alike coming into an agreement about how the internet is actually going to operate, and the algorithms of Facebook and other platforms that basically ensure that if you post pictures of puppies and kittens, I know from my own experience on Facebook, like I literally will get hundreds uh, of of reactions and discussion when I post stuff about war, whether it's the genocide in Gaza or Ukraine. When I post stuff about corporate power, I get I'll get five, six, seven reactions. So, Jack, I got to tell you, I know the people that are on my feed. I am convinced that I think that the term that's being used is shadow banned, right? Like there's no doubt in my mind that my posts and the algorithm are making sure that they don't get the same quote organic reach.
Well, it also just might be that your audience really, appreciates cats a little bit more than politics. So, that's you need to make some memes that have more cats in them, but political cats.
Comrade Kitten,
Comrade
Comrade Kitten.
Kitty.
Comrade
Comrade
Kitty,
Kitty.
I think you may be onto
That's right.
something. Again, I want to lift up Jackie again, who says there are loads of great independent channels out there. It's so hard to keep up with it all, and you're right about that. One of
And
the things that
thank you for choosing to be with us, Jackie, considering
yeah,
that.
right, right on, and all of you who are listening and are watching and or listening to Redneck Gone Green, and there's Kelly, another Kelly's been with us from the very beginning. Kelly says, "Give us the kittens." Again, like I'm all for the kittens, I'm all for the puppies, 100%. And you know what, Jack? Kelly may be onto something. I think Comrade Kitty might actually need to be in
Well,
a
we've been
meme that we
talking
develop.
about like what can we do to make make our revolution more appealing, and I think definitely cat memes has to be a part of it. It's
I think cat means does have to be a part of it, and I'll tell you. So listen, this whole conversation again. Let's before we move off, let's celebrate Julian Assange is released. I think Julian Assange is a hero. I think Edward Snowden is a hero. Uh,
absolutely.
Chelsea Manning, like absolutely 100%. But I do want to switch over to have a conversation about the Working Families Party and fusion voting, which was the topic of the conversation that we had. And
Right, and
Desert
I
now,
want to
oh yeah,
let me
go ahead.
just kind of like add. So the reason, folks, that we're having this particular the topic for today's episode is because David went to be a part of a this thing called the Rising Majority Congress, and I was very interested in what he was going to be doing there, and David, do you want to tell us a little bit about Rising Majority, what it was at this event that you went to, and kind of like get us started with that? I think that'd be
You
great.
bet. So, I mean, I'm going to say the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? The Rising Majority was instigated, funded by Movement for Black Lives, and obviously, Movement for Black Lives is something we talk about and applaud and laud on this program, and will continue to do so. And the Rising Majority was an effort to bring together and build a powerful left for, in their words, radical democracy and regenerative economy. Obviously, things that we celebrate, things that we want to lift up. We're all about it. Uh, uh, they are the premise was to cohere and unite our movements, to develop a shared vision and strategy to anchor our efforts and weave new forms of connection and solidarity, to develop and promote ideas and narratives, cultural interventions to influence popular consciousness, to uproot the fundamental ideas of white supremacy and patriarchy and capitalism. So in every way, I went bluntly excited, and a lot of that excitement or my hopefulness was met because it was there were about 1,000 of us in St. Louis. You had folks from like almost every social change effort, every constituency. There was some fantastic conversation around the difference between economic power and narrative power and governance power. There was so much that was actually good, and I want to applaud and laud that. But I also want to be clear that the core leadership of the rising majority came to that conference and created an agenda that demonstrated an unshakable commitment that they have, that the entire social movement left should mobilize to, in their words, block Trump and build. So
Now,
uh,
now, I want to just interrupt for a second, David, because I want to get at why this is so important. This rising majority Congress is so important, and I want to posit that when you talk about what got you excited about it, you have every reason to be excited, because a lot of that stuff, the reason that you're excited about it is because it resonates with what you want to see happen. Isn't that right?
Oh, 100%. And again, I don't mind having principled debate and disagreement about how to accomplish those things. I really don't. And so I did want to lift up that there was a lot positive there at Rising Majority. But also, what I experienced at Rising Majority was this idea that, and they acknowledge that Joe Biden is a neoliberal, and imperialist, but they also believe that Trump and the Make America Great movement represents explicit and blatant fascism. And although there was lots of space given to the horrors of the genocide in Gaza and to Biden's role in it, there was no time given to the idea that voting for Biden empowers genocide, empowers the empire. And so again, that's big picture. But and again, I've got many progressives who I know are going to be holding their nose and pulling the lever for Biden because that's what they think that the two-party system forces them to do. I respect that. I disagree with it, but again, we can have respectful disagreement. But what really floored me, Jack, and what I'm still kind of reeling from was the commitment to urge the entire social movement left to work with and go into the Working Families Party and to use fusion voting. So not only has the Working Families already endorsed Biden, but the Working Families Party is literally a wing of the Democratic Party. It is the it is the sort of the liberal left flank of the Democratic Party. And fusion voting is a way to try to get past uh, uh, what the two-party voting system forces many people into believing that they have to choose either Democrat or Republican, which I think is a fundamental part of the problem.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to hearing you talk about fusion voting. What I brought up here on the screen is we're looking at a graphic that is from the Rising Majority, like this handout that they gave. It's like the revision document. And for those of you who are viewing right now, you can see that, it's got this kind of like a graphic where it has a red MAGA circle versus like the united front against fascism that it says. And I think this is really, again, I for me personally, I have to tell you, I find this to be really frightening and disappointing and depressing, because it's explicitly partisan. This is not coming from Working Families Party, like you said, which is essentially an arm of the Democrat Party. It is the Rising Majority, which is supposedly this coalition of coming together of, who explicitly states, the Rising Majority explicitly states that what they want to do is bring together the left, unify the left around a vision and around a strategy. And what do we see here in one of its core documents? It is explicitly partisan, right? Because this is the Democrat Party has gone all in as on this kind of like MAGA and Trump being like the unique evil in the world that must be fought. And I find that to be extremely concerning, because what it is doing, again, I want to go back to what got you excited about it, David, right? It's like you were excited about a number of different strategies and this rhetoric that is very, I also find it very, when you first told me that you were going to be doing this, like I thought, oh, this is cool. This is a great idea. This is going to be awesome. It's so cool that David is going to be a part of this, right? I mean, he's going to get to put his vision that I agree with in many ways and am excited about. He's going to be able to be there and stand up for that, and it's terrifying to me because I feel like the problem with the left is already that we're too fractured, that we aren't unified, that we aren't revolutionary enough. And here we have this like a national organization that's clearly well funded, that has like legitimate grassroots like pedigree, and is effectively acting again as the grassroots arm of the Democrat Party. That to me is terrible. I mean, does that make sense to you at all, David?
Sure. And I want to lift up Kelly, who says people don't think they have another option outside the two-party system. And that is 100% true, Kelly. And that's what people are trying to grapple with. And this is what the folks at the rising majority are trying to grapple with. And they're coming to the conclusion that the way to get past that is through fusion voting. So I want to take a moment to explain what fusion voting is, so that we can talk about it in a reasonable way. You see, fusion voting basically, let's remember, fusion voting is only allowed in 7 states. The Supreme Court decision of Timmons versus New Party making it very clear that unless a state election code specifically allows it, fusion voting can't be done. So there are 7 states. The one that has been used the most is New York, and we can learn some lessons there. But the way it works is, let's say Jack is running for office, and on a fusion voting state, what happens is that Jack's name will appear, and Jack's opponents will appear on a ballot design, but there'll be multiple party lines. In other words, it's not just Jack's name with a D or an R or a G next to it. Jack's name will be there, and then running up and down, you'll see different parties, and different parties can endorse a candidate. But here's what fusion allows: multiple endorsements. And the idea is, to be fair, the idea is that fusion will allow multiple parties to endorse the same candidate. And the idea is that this will avoid the spoiler effect and give an opportunity for people to be able to vote on a different ballot line for a particular candidate. And that is true. It absolutely does allow that. But it also literally has the effect of sheepdogging people into candidates that have already been endorsed by one of the 2 major parties. In other words, it does not encourage, facilitate, or encourage or allow multiple voices to get elected the way proportional representation does. Instead, all it does is say, oh, well, Jack got X number of votes on the Working Families Party, and that's supposed to somehow make Jack feel as if he is beholden to the Working Families Party because he knows that some amount of his votes actually got there. It's just not the way it works. I mean, in effect, what we see is the Working Families Party basically, historically, continuously, always caves to the neoliberals in the Democratic Party. They'll fight it. So it's no different than the Bernie Sanders strategy of going into the Democratic Party primary and getting people enthusiastic and excited about a campaign within that party. But at the end of the day, what ends up happening, of course, we know everybody is told, all right, you had your fun in the primary, progressives. Now sit down and shut up and get yourself, knuckle down, kowtow to the corporatists who control the Democratic Party. And what almost always happens, Jack, is whether it's a playbook that is so familiar, and it goes like this. And it, like, I first saw it in the Jesse Jackson campaigns of 84 and 88. And in 84 and 88, the Jesse Jackson campaigns were insurgent maverick campaigns. It's the first time I'd ever heard of Palestine, by the way, as a young college student. It was this amazing campaign and all the energy, enthusiasm, and excitement associated with that. And I learned a lot in those campaigns. I was white person, I learned how to genuinely take leadership from people of color. I learned about bringing coalitions together with environmentalists and organized labor and women's issues and connecting those to living wage campaigns. I mean, it was for those of you who are old like me and remember the Jesse Jackson campaigns of 84 and 88, they were absolutely just inspiring to be part of. And then the corporatists and the militarists and the imperialists who actually run the Democratic Party then overwhelm the primary process and with money and so forth, television ads and radio ads. They beat back Jesse Jackson, and Jesse said, "I know what let's do. Let's form another political force. In this case, it was the Rainbow Coalition, and we'll force the Democratic Party to the right." And in 1992, Jerry Brown comes up, does the same exact thing, enthusiasm and excitement. Again, getting money out of politics and that 1-800 number, 100%. There was all this energy and enthusiasm. At the end of it, Jerry Brown loses the nomination. He says, "I know what let's do. Let's create another so-called independent organization, and we'll force the Democrats to the left." That was the We the People campaign. Then we'll fast forward to Dennis Kucinich. Same thing. Energy, enthusiasm, excitement, loses the Democratic Party primary. He says, "I know what let's do. Let's form another organization to force the Democratic Party to the right." That's Progressive Democrats of America. Then Howard Dean it's a cycle that is repeated over
It's so
and over and
frustrating.
over again.
It's so frustrating, David. I mean, like I gotta tell you, like I bought in so hard for Bernie, and Bernie did the same. Like talking to you now and hearing about it, it just like it should have been obvious at the time. I wish that I had realized that it was, but Bernie did this thing called, oh my God, it's called Our Revolution. That's right, Our Revolution. And what a joke. That organization was a joke to start with. I saw it. I didn't think about it because I thought, oh, grassroots, it's fine. And now it's just like I watched the tweets that it puts out, and it's just it may as well be like Biden's social media manager. I mean, it's like a joke. It's just an absolute joke.
And again, this is the reason that it is so critical to have genuine independent political formations. And I can spend the rest of our time together, Jack, criticizing the Green Party or the Party for Socialism and Liberation or the Peace and Freedom Party or any of the other progressive or left parties. But the reality is that for all the flaws, breaking with the Democratic Party and being genuinely independent, both politically and financially, from the leadership of the Democratic Party and the funders of the Democratic Party is really important. And I really have to say that the Green Party, in its inception, like, look, this system is not just designed to prevent an alternative political party from winning and achieving power. This system is designed to prevent an alternative political voice from even existing. So the fact that the Green Party is continually on the ballot, continues to stay relevant, and it is in fact relevant. Jack, that here's something, and we don't normally do rah Green Party on this program, but it really is important to point out that the Green Party has elected, I think it's something like 10,000 people at the local level since its inception.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, like, let's we're talking about Green Party, we're talking about like independent voices. I mean, like, people may not know that David was absolutely excluded from, you have a lot to you have something in common with RFK Jr., David, because you too have been excluded from the presidential debate.
Well, that's true, and I will say that there was something rather apropos and ironic about the rising majority happening in St. Louis, because St. Louis was where not only was I excluded from that first presidential debate in 2004, but myself, Green Party nominee for president in 2004, and Michael Badnarik, a Libertarian Party candidate nominee for president, were arrested in St. Louis for the audacity of trying to cross the police line there, because we wanted to we literally had paperwork that was a show cause order that we want to deliver to the Commission on Presidential Debates to say that they should have allowed us to debate. And to be clear, our argument was not that Michael Badnarik and I had the right to participate. That was a secondary argument. The principal argument was that the American people had the right to hear from candidates that were on the ballot in enough states to win the Electoral College, who had jumped through all of those damn hoops that had been created to prevent voices from being heard. And we were the only two voices. And this is where it gets interesting. The Green Party and the Libertarian Party are the only two explicitly anti-war national parties. And certainly that was true in 2004. Badnarik and Cobb were the only two that were calling for the end to the illegal, immoral, and unethical wars in Iraq. And of course, since that time, the empire just continues to gin up wars of empire. And of course, I was the only candidate calling for single-payer universal health care. But the Libertarian Party and the Green Party were in agreement on dismantling the World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund. I mean, there's something
right,
very
folks,
unique about.
Get ready for your write-in ballot. All right, in November. This guy right there.
Yeah. Well, you're very sweet, Jack. I appreciate that. But I can tell you, look, the Green Party is going to have a presidential nominating convention. I think that Jill Stein has just received enough primary delegates. She's the in political lingo, the putative nominee. You've also got Claudia de la Cruz running the Party for Socialism and Liberation. You have Cornel West running an independent campaign. You have RFK Jr. running an independent campaign. And so, I'm not running for president, but I can tell you this. I am very clear that the Democratic Party machine is an anti-democratic political operation. In fact, the Democratic Party are suing Greens and PSL and Cornel West to keep us off the ballot in multiple states. I mean, it's really horrific. And that's why I don't think fusion is the way forward. I don't think the Working Families Party is the way forward. I think that what we should do is unite and agree on a truly democratic system, like proportional representation for seats where there can be multiple winners, like state legislature or Congress, or if there's only going to be one winner, ranked choice voting, which is, and it's really interesting, in Maine, ranked choice voting is going to be used at the statewide level. In Alaska, it's going to be used. So the reality is that there are democratic reforms. And if we wanted to treat democracy seriously, a suite of ways to democratize the electoral process, that's what gets me excited. And it would include things like full publicly funded elections, right? Let's recognize that this idea of legalized bribery, that the current campaign finance laws, which are pathetic and weak and have been stripped even further through the horrific Citizens United decision. Like, if we had full publicly funded elections, we could actually have genuine discourse and find out what people agree or disagree with. But wait, there's more. Ranked choice voting and proportional representation to democratize the electoral process itself. It's not just the financing of campaigns, but using voting systems that would empower and allow voters to fully express their opinion, and then allow multiple parties and multiple voices to actually govern. And Jack, that's how you can get to a genuinely pluralistic society where people's beliefs, even if they are minority beliefs, are still represented in the governing institutions. This is something I think that is incredibly powerful. And publicly funded elections, ranked choice voting, proportional representation, felony reenfranchisement. Let's be clear that the criminal justice system, racist as it is being used now to completely eviscerate the voting block for both Black and brown bodied people, but also for poor working class white folks. We could have same-day voter registration. I mean, there's so many things that we could do to democratize elections if we had an unabashed democracy movement. And that's what I'm calling for is let's get out of the partisanship. You know, one team good, the other team bad. I am a principled leftist. Everybody knows that. But I really do believe that we need to democratize the process by which we utilize elections.
Right, David. I want to get back though to because I love what you're saying. Obviously, I resonate with so much of what you're talking about, and I'm sure that a lot of the folks who are like I'm sure that all the people who are watching the show tonight are agree with that and agree with me on supporting you in a lot of that stuff. But I think that what I want to get back to is kind of like our theme for today's show, which is like this idea of like this rising majority showing up, having some rhetoric that sounds really appealing to people who agree with you, because that's what's so important right here, is that the stuff that you're talking about, you went into going to this rising majority conference thinking that you were going to be able to further all that stuff that you were talking about. You thought that you felt good about it. You thought like this is a place for us as leftists to come together and build power to be able to further our goals, right? And what ends up happening is that when you get there, you realize, wait a minute, this isn't what is happening is not all the stuff that you just talked about, which is like democratizing, like further democratizing some of the stuff that we have talked about on the show about democratizing the economy, right? Which is so important, something that people can just like get involved with immediately, something that can benefit them immediately, like in a tangible, practical way, right? That's not what you saw when you came to
Well, to be
this
clear,
rising majority.
there was absolutely space for imagining how to create a post-capitalist political economy. It wasn't as clear as I wish, but there was an opportunity for genuine debate on hearing that. So I don't want to say, like, I want to be fair to the experience that I saw. There was
Right.
genuine openness and willingness to amend the language, framing, and strategy around the idea of leading into a democratic economy. There was openness to exploring democratic election policies after 2024. And that's the thing, right? Like there was language around co-governance and what that means. Like again, what was really clear to me was that this experience was all about trying to have a big pep rally for Biden and the Working Families Party. And again, that's just not where I'm at. And it's not where I'm
Well,
going to be.
I mean, I think that it's for me. I have a hard time. And I'd like to, I'd love to hear in the chat if people think that, you can consider yourself or call yourself a leftist and support an administration that is funding a genocide. I mean, like that in and of itself. I mean, like I just don't understand how that can be so. It's this organization can be so cavalier in its endorsement of an administration that is clearly just beyond the pale. I don't get it. But, you know, again, I appreciate what your clarification, bringing out the fact that, there were these forums for a more democratic and a more transformative kind of policy approach, right? I think that's great. I appreciate you pointing that out. However, again, I want to come back to what is really at issue here is this idea of like the Bernie Sanders energy, the sheepdog energy, the WFP energy, which is we are what I mean working families party. I mean they're talking about being a party of the working people, right? And yet here we go. What do we end up having is this really effectively, regardless of what the rhetoric is, that the effective outcome is supporting a Democrat Party that is simply it's counter-revolutionary. It basically the outcome is undeniably counter to to leftist values, what are fundamentally leftist values. And I think okay, so what I want from you, David, is seeing as this is a repeating occurrence where you have and clearly the Democrats have worked very hard and successfully to be able to co-opt language and ideas into and just kind of like bring them into its orbit of, corporatist greed, right? And fascism, as in my opinion. And I think what I want to kind of like hear from you as somebody who's been really just immersed in this movement for such a long time, and literally just last week you basically effectively got taken for a ride. I mean, like, I'm not trying to be a
Well,
dick
I
here,
mean, again,
but I mean,
I
like, that's
disagree
kind
with
of
that.
what.
So you're setting it up in so many ways that I'm going like like we have a difference of opinion about that,
Well,
right? Like
then I mean, then just share with me what you mean,
again,
like, how do you feel about that?
I've already laid it out. I think that they are making a strategic mistake. I think that they are smart people. We want the same thing. They have a different strategic orientation to try to get there. I do not believe that the Democratic Party or Working Families Party is the path to get to the world that I want to live in. But I also understand that this voting system and the two-party system and the duopoly have gotten many people to believe that there's no other alternative. Like Kelly said it so well earlier, people don't believe that they have an option. So I think that this is what we have to do, is to build the movement for a multi-party democracy. That's why proportional representation and access to the ballot and the debates, and Desert Mantis, who pointed out the debates need to be taken away. And it's actually not just the network media desert, but it's also the fact that the Commission on Presidential Debates, which sounds very official, right? But the Commission on Presidential Debates is actually a private corporation that was created by the Democratic National Committee and the Republican National Committee together, who came together to take the debates away from the League of Women Voters, because the League of Women Voters had the audacity to allow Ross Perot, an independent candidate, on the stage, right? Like, and so again, it's complex, it is complicated. And at the end of the day, I think the path forward is to build a mass movement to democratize the economy and democratize elections. And I want to end with this because we're coming towards the end of the show. To me, folks have heard me say I engage in elections, but I am not an electoral fetishist. And that's kind of a talking point. But I do want to underscore that for me, when I talk about that, I don't think that, excuse me.
Bless you.
How about that? How about that for timing? I don't think that what the world that I want to create is not a DIY thing. It's not do it yourself. It's DIT, do it together. Only we the people can actually create the government and the society that I want to live in. Right. And that's one where everybody has enough food to eat. Everybody gets access to health care. It is literally from each according to their abilities and gifts, to each according to their needs, not wants, but needs. And that's literally economic democracy. We could do this. And I'll maybe on another program, I'll lay out the idea of imagining, instead of local unemployment offices, there'd be local employment offices where you show up and say, hey, I'm ready to get to work. It's not just that money is given to you. It's like, okay, well, here's what the community has said we need. Maybe it's public schools, maybe it's a library, maybe it's healthcare clinic or whatever, but you literally match people to what democratically is needed within the community. Point is that could and should actually be happening, and we could do it ourselves if the corrupting influence of corporate money and the wealthy predatory class were not in the way. So we can do it, and government cannot do it for us. Not local government, not the state government, not the federal government. However, a good government might be able to enact some policies that help encourage and facilitate that process, but ultimately we still have to do it. Likewise, if it's a really bad and repressive government, they can't stop us from doing it. They might make it much more difficult, but at the end of the day, all we have is us. Like nobody's going to come and save us, y'all. Like at the end of the day, we need to actually create a mass movement of ordinary people who were engaging where we live, work, play, and pray in creating the kind of world that we need to live in. That's the approach that I'm taking. We do it at the local level, and then we confederate those, and that's how you have a peaceful revolution at the mass level. But I don't think that voting alone is ever going to actually get us to the world that I want to live in.
Right on. Yeah, and I mean, I think that for me, the takeaway from this is, you know, the rhetoric is lovely. I think that the strategy and implementation is what's really key. I think that is what's so important. I think it's very easy for us to get emotionally involved and engaged with ideas like like a Medicare for all, or like anti-war platform. I think what seems to me to be really important for my takeaway from this is to really be clear about just like being able to say like, well, what is it, how is it that you plan on getting there? What is your strategy? Like, what's the strategy that you're using? Like, because like people can say anything that they want, and they do all the time. And this is, again, one of the problems with the Democrat Party is that they've done such a great job of, basically co-opting the language of the left in a lot of ways, and, basically just saying whatever they have to be able to get elected. And, I mean, I can't tell you how disappointed I was in AOC, and how, like, embarrassed I am that I thought, there was some hope there. But, this is, we're so desperate for an alternative. We really need to see like the opportunity for us to make the kind of change that we want to see in the world. And so something comes along that looks good, sounds good. And I think that, it's just got to be where we're training ourselves and teaching ourselves to be able to say, well, hold on a second, that sounds great. What is it? How is it that you plan on getting there? It's not enough just to say there's a problem. It's not enough just to say, I want this wonderful thing. It's got to be, well, what's the strategy? And like, and again, I'm going to say it, this is what I really love about so many of the episodes that we've done over the past few months, is that, David, you'll bring on people who are offering very real, very tangible strategies that incorporate exactly the kind of principles that we believe in and that we want to see in the world. And that's something that I find so important and so essential. And I really do hope that all of us, like, going forward, are going to be keeping that in our minds. Like, it's not just about a really appealing personality. It's not just about, some idea that really makes me feel good, but like, what is it that's a realistic strategy to be able to get from point A to point B that I'm willing to actually engage with and invest my very precious time and money and effort and resources into. So, and again, the reason that I'm talking about this is because I think it is really unfortunate that people who are looking for an alternative on the left are looking to an organization like a Rising Majority or Working Families Party, thinking that this is the option that they have for themselves. And it's not. And the reason is because the strategy that they are promoting to be able to get to that endpoint that we want to see happening is simply untenable. It's not workable. So anyway, I'm going to let you sign us off, David. I know we're at the end, and I want to thank you very much for sharing all that with me and with our audience. And I'm going to let you take us away.
Well, thank you so much, Jack. As always, I love you and I appreciate you, including when we have kind and loving disagreements. Right, like that's the essence of it. I don't believe that any one person has all of the answers, and we should, in fact, engage in this kind of rigorous and robust debate to really figure out just what the hell we should be doing. I also want to thank you, the viewer, listener of Redneck Gone Green. We are up to 4,000 subscribers on Substack. And I want to ask folks to please share that with others. Like, comment, subscribe. You can join us on Facebook. You can join us on Substack. That's where the weekly writing will go out. You could also join us on either Rumble or YouTube and subscribe to those channels. We really are trying to build an audience where people are hearing these kinds of ideas that are not being covered at all in the corporate media. And I want to encourage you to join us next week, because next week is Independence Day, July 4th. So in honor of that, we're going to have on Tuesday, July 2nd, Mary Hooks of the Movement for Black Lives as the guest. and we're going to do a deep dive into one of the great political treatises in U.S. history. It's called What to the Slave is the 4th of July, written by Frederick Douglass. It was a keynote address that he delivered on July 5th in 1852 at an Independence Day celebration. Douglass, in his speech, just scathingly indicts the U.S. empire and slavery itself, which had been codified into the U.S. Constitution, and we need to come to terms with that. And I think that now the movement for Black Lives, which is ascendant, Mary Hooks is a perfect guest to have on. So please join us next week. Again, I want to thank you, Jack, as producer and friend of this program. Or producer of the program and friend of me, the Redneck. But I also want to thank you, the viewer, listener. Keep on keeping on. Peace.